First, I just want to say thank you so much for being so cooperative last class. I heard it was awesome. You all signed the attendance sheet. I really, really appreciate your patience for this week. It's really helping me out, and I know I can trust you all to have another good class today. And today we are going to be drawing on toned paper. So I just wanted to go through a couple of tips and give you some examples before we dive into drawing today. So the first tip, and this is kind of just to think about drawing today, but also kind of moving forward, is there's lots of different paper out there. So, depending on what you brought to class today, you might want to try a different type of paper. If you don't like the paper you have today, don't write off this process completely. There's lots of different paper out there. You just kind of have to play around and see what works best for you. So today you might have either gray paper that you brought or made, but there's a large variety of paper out there. It can vary in value, color, and texture. So there are grays, warms, or cools, and tans, all with varying value, darker or lighter. So you have like dark gray, light gray, all kinds of stuff in between. The texture and the weight of the paper is also really important besides just the value and the color. This is a little bit harder to spot in the store, and you can never really fully understand the texture until you put pencil to the paper. Just in my experience, I've noticed that charcoal paper tends to have more of a tooth or a roughness to it, which I tend to like, while multimedia paper or drawing paper would have a little less tooth. So depending on if you like kind of a smoother finish or maybe a little bit more of like a texture to your drawing. So just some examples of this is obviously like a nice kind of mid-tone gray. You can tell it's mid-tone here. Oh, and these are going to be examples from Daniel Maidman. So if you're interested in his style or his work, check him out. He's got a lot of really nice stuff. And the names in the corners are actually the names of the models, which I really appreciate that touch. So you can see here that this is a nice mid-tone gray that he's using because you can still see the black line. So it's not so dark that you can't see the dark charcoal. But also the white is standing out in a really nice way. And then the tan, you can have kind of a different approach with this in terms of the white kind of standing out in a slightly different way, a little more kind of variation between the white and the tan there. And then this is actually with graphite, so using pencil with the white charcoal or white color pencil on the tan paper. Also, black is an option. These aren't Daniel Maidman. These are just some other artists I follow that I found for you. Some white charcoal or white color pencil. I think these are actually both white charcoal on black paper. This is an option, and we'll be kind of thinking about this a little bit later, but just wanted to show you that this is something that you can do. A little bit of a darker gray, and obviously this is going to incorporate a little bit more of the darker black charcoal here, and really love his style because he uses a lot of those kind of implied lines to just have some things fade off, so he's not thinking about that area of focus and letting a lot of the drawing kind of fade out on the sides, like almost remaining unfinished, if you will, but I really love that style that he has. Okay, and the next step is to let the paper do the heavy lifting. So if you find yourself struggling to complete an entire value drawing, this toned paper may be the ticket. How? By giving you the midtone. All that painstaking work you do on white paper, developing the intermediate values, is supplied by the paper itself in this case. So toned paper leaves you the easier task of completing the lights and the darks, and that midtone is kind of built in. But the trick with this is that you want to allow the tone of the paper to be part of your drawings. You don't need to go in everywhere. You do not want to overlap the white and the black charcoal. As you're looking at all of these drawings, you'll never see an area where those two are mixing. It's super important to make sure that you're not doing that. The two together will actually create like a third color. It's like a gray, almost like blue tinted color when the white and the black charcoal mix together. So you want to keep them separate. You want to think about building the two areas individually of each other. Do not overlay the white and the black together. Okay, but that is to say that there are lots of really interesting things that you can do between having the white charcoal and then erasing and then having the black come in. Just like we were talking about light last time, where you want to have kind of those highlights and then the midtones and then those shadows and core shadows, and having those different steps to create that sense of value. Okay, the next tip, and the great thing about the gray paper is you can hide your preliminary marks. So preliminary marks are the loose lines you make as you find the shapes of your drawing, can be even more hidden on top of the toned paper. And you don't have to worry about erasing the toned paper as you begin working like we did when we had the kind of thin layer of charcoal down first on the drawing paper, and then we went in and started working off of that. In that case, when you erased, you were erasing into your toned ground. But now you don't have to worry about that, so you can actually go in and do some nice preliminary work without having to worry about erasing away your tone. So some artists like the foreground of the evidence of the search, these preliminary drawings living right up front in their drawing, like Matisse and Da Vinci do this, so we can too, right? We love that pentimenti. You can always leave that in there. But if that's not part of your aesthetic, tone paper allows you to follow the natural process of making preliminary marks without forcing you to display them in the finished piece. So you naturally press lightly when making these uncommitted marks, producing a correspondingly fader line. On tone paper, that line is effectively invisible unless you go looking for it, so you can seek it out as you develop your drawing, confident that a viewer who is enjoying your drawing for aesthetics instead of studying it for the process won't have these lines forced on their experience. So it'll be more up to you. You can control this a little bit more. So things like this, where you might want to leave the kind of line over the knee or showing the arm as it comes across as just a line, feel free to kind of, still use line as part of your process here, but you can also be a little bit neater and cleaner if you want to be in your end process here. And again, these are toned, the kind of tan paper with graphite and white charcoal. Okay. And then next tip, make sure you're putting in work into the darks. This is one area where toned paper actually makes your life a little bit harder. So on white paper, any mark at all is a statement. On toned paper, as we were just discussing, faint marks tend to be invisible or unclear. You will have to really emphasize your darks in order to establish them with force and dynamism. Over the years, I've changed pencils from HB, 2B, 3B as I worked at developing my shadows areas more fully. Don't be afraid of those darks. If your work involves darks, you will need to develop a strategy for executing them on toned paper, which is different from the strategy used on the comparatively more forgiving white paper. So you really need to be able to feel a little bit more confident about your dark areas, go in with those shadows and make sure you're developing them. So again, it will pass that squint test that we were talking about last class, where if you were to put the drawing away from you, kind of relax your eyes, that figure should pop out from your background. Okay, so just like how these examples are here and here, really going into those darks and making sure you're creating that sense of contrast. Okay, and then the last tip here is follow the light. As far as I'm concerned, this is the real aesthetic benefit of toned paper. Because the eye understands that the default value of white paper is white, it is difficult to make drawings on white paper where the lights take on an independent vitality of their own. The light emerges reluctantly as the surrounding darks are built up. On toned paper, by contrast, light is a divergence from the natural value of the paper, and so the viewer subliminally understands that it is an active aesthetic phenomenon. There is a glow to the lights in drawing on toned paper, which is unique to the medium. Instead of leaving out the lights as you do on white paper, you build up the lights. This means you can readily and profoundly explore the way light glances off the bone, or diffuses in skin, or shimmers on hair. If light speaks to you, spend time on your toned paper learning to express your inspiration with this most accommodating of all options. Right, so just a couple more examples. I think it's really great when we're talking about light, like we did last class, moving into this now. I think it's really cool that you can spend some time really building up those lights, just like we do building up the shadows. I love this drawing. I love the light and the shadow of that arm there. And again, remember thinking of the difference between form shadows, which is the shadows that are actually describing the shapes and the dimensionality of the form, versus the cast shadows, which is just kind of a surface shadow from something else blocking the light. Okay, so today we're going to be using black and white charcoal today on the toned paper, but there are many options. So black and white colored pencils on toned paper, pastels, Conte, graphite, all of these things can be used on toned paper. We talked about all the variations of toned paper, so feel free after today to bring toned paper with you and use it during any in-class drawing sessions. Okay, so just some more examples, some different styles. These are some different artists. This is actually colored pencil, I think, in some areas, like down on the neck and in the hair, and then I think there's some white chalk happening, so some different values going on in here. But I do love that sense of light on the face, which is why I included that one. I think it's really beautiful. This is actually a pastel, so a little bit of like a yellow in the top there, which I even think the blouse is a little bit pink. And as you're working with fabric or clothing as options for the models, if they're clothed today, really think about the way that you can find the structure underneath the clothes, and still finding all of those options, and don't get too caught up in doing all the little details of the folds of the fabric. Again, thinking about kind of that overall value system, finding the light side, finding the dark side, and then any details that are within there should follow the rules of this is still on the light side, my dark should stay lighter, dark side, darker all over. Remember those kind of two things to simplify things down. And again, our focus is on the figure, so make sure that this doesn't turn into like a fabric still life, right? It should really be about the figure here. Okay, and this is colored pencil, black or maybe like a dark brown with white on toned paper. Just some different examples here, some different styles, a little bit more contrasty on the left-hand side. But again, just remember, please, please, please do not do large areas where the white and whatever other material you're using are overlapping, right? They should be in separate areas, still have gradients, still think about how you can move from one to the other, but don't put them over each other in too large of areas because you will start to get this kind of other tint going on. Okay, so for class today, we're going to get warmed up like usual with gestures, either using vine charcoal or ebony pencils on your newsprint. Then we will move on to longer drawings on your tone paper using black and white charcoal. You can use compressed charcoal, which is the big chunks, or charcoal pencils. Either way is fine. The format will be the same as last class, so 5 2-minute gestures to get warmed up, followed by 3 5-minute gestures. If you want to experiment with a little bit, because the newsprint is kind of like a grayish toned paper. If you want to experiment with a little white charcoal on that, maybe that's something to kind of think about. 10-minute break, so just to get everybody situated, get their drawing paper out, charcoal out, all that good stuff. And then we'll go into 2 20-minute seated poses with a 5-minute break in between, 15-minute break, stretch your legs, get up and move around a little bit, and then 2 20-minute poses or 1 30-minute pose depending on the time we have left to close out the day. So if you want to switch to your drawing paper and do a charcoal drawing on just your regular white drawing paper after using the tone paper, feel free. You can break up these drawings however you'd like. You can do more than one pose on your sheet of toned paper. If I know Gene's is the model today, if he wants to do like 1 30-minute pose and you want to save that for the toned paper, just kind of be conversation with him to make sure that you know kind of what the future holds for the poses, so you can plan out your paper. If you only have one sheet of toned, just make sure you choose what pose you want to use the toned paper for strategically. Okay, and then over the weekend, just to kind of talk about that before I end the video today, keep practicing in your sketchbook. There's lots of reference photos online. I also want you to be thinking about drawing from life, so if you see people or if anyone's willing to model for you for, 5 2-minute poses or things like that, feel free. Again, they can be closed, that's totally fine. I will be starting the grading process for the midterm portfolios this weekend on D2L, so keep an eye out for that. I will still make sure to meet with anyone that I haven't met with yet for the midterm portfolio meeting. I still will meet with all of you, I promise. I will let you know about that next week. It'll probably be during class time. I'll just be pulling people out individually just to chat with them while the rest of the class is drawing. If I haven't checked out your sketchbook yet, please make sure to bring it with you next week. I will do that first, make sure I'll go through and check everybody's sketchbooks if I haven't done yours yet. If you've already done it, great. Just keep working in it. We will be doing some color next week, so if you have any colored materials that you want to use, any coloring materials you want to use, please feel free to bring them. So colored pencils, pastels, markers, anything like that, bring them with you. We're going to be experimenting with some colored grounds. I'm going to be bringing the materials in for that, some rollers and some paint and stuff, so we're going to have a fun week next week experimenting with some things like that, but bring your own stuff if you have it. I will have my colored pencils for everyone to use, but only like 2 or 3 colors a person, with obviously some limited choices depending on how many people need to use them. So again, if you have your own things, that would be awesome. And then next week, we will be back to normal. I'll be back in the classroom. Thank you again so much for all your patience. I really can't wait to be back with you all. It's killing me to be out of the classroom, so I am really looking forward to it. If you have any questions, the student helper has kind of the map of everything that's going to be kind of happening today, but also they have my phone number, so if anything goes on, they have a way to contact me, but also email me if you have any questions at all. All right, enjoy drawing today, and I hope you like drawing on the toned paper. All right, bye.